All right, so I was just brought this Toro lawnmower. I was told that it runs rough and it's hard to start. To me, it sounds like it's a typical carburetor issue with these Briggs and Stratton. They say it's guaranteed to start, but they should honestly look into putting a different brand of engine on these instead of using these Briggs. No prime, no choke, no oil changes. Let's take a look at the air filter. It's in decent condition. We'll blow that out with the air compressor. Check the oil. I've already pulled it out and looked at it, but just for the camera, oil's good. And for the record, sometimes running weird can be a symptom of a broken flywheel key. I'm not seeing any obvious damage on the blade, so I don't think that they hit anything. But sometimes it can cause that. It just knocks it out of time. Then you have to disassemble the whole top end to get to that flywheel. But I'm just going to pull the cord through. There's no gas in it right now. I just want to see if there's anything impacting under the deck. So I'm good with that. Now, one other thing that's good to check before you get too far involved. So obviously you want to look at the simple stuff first. But we do want to check the spark plug. Make sure that looks good at least. And the spark plug looks to be a little crunched in. So I'm going to gap that properly. That might have been his issue, but we're still going to pull that carburetor apart. All right, so we're just going to check the gap. Looks like it's at the low end, so it barely even wants to go in there. I have to put a good amount of force on it, but we're just going to take it up about 30 thousandths, and that's close enough for me. Doesn't have to be dead on. Looks a little bit better. I'm going to clean this up a little bit with a brush. Perfect. Stick that back in. Spark plug back in the socket. Then I just like to turn them in by hand. And then just a decent twist. You don't want to do it too tight. And of course your boot. Felt it snap into place. So now that part's done, we're going to take the carburetor off. First thing, we'll take off the air hat. These are a 7 and 8 millimeter socket respectively. You have this PCV line, which you'll have to watch to put that back on when you go to reinstall everything. Now here's something that can be kind of a tricky part. But first we're going to pinch off this fuel line. That's just good practice to get into. And we're just going to pinch off this clamp. Just like that. So very carefully walk the carburetor off. This just fell off. Take note of that. We're gonna pull the governor and choke linkage off. And then just slide that part off, and there you go. Meet you guys at the workbench. The problems with these carburetors are extremely common. This one needs to be cleaned. I can already tell that much just by looking at it. But the issue is not out here. It's inside it, so you're going to need to take it apart. A 7mm socket. Now these bowls can be kind of a pain to get off sometimes. That spark plug gapping tool seems to work okay. Definitely some dirt and grit in there. Pair of needle nose. Take the float pin out. Take your float, and then you also have the needle. Don't lose this. Throw all that back in here. So the residual fuel has already done a little bit of our job already. But we're just going to spray off the inside and outside of this carburetor because that's what's going to clean it probably the fastest. You don't need much. Now, some would say that that might be enough, but your problem lies inside of these little jets. Just like that. Now these can only go back in one way. We'll get to that point when we do. So they also come apart just like this. Be very careful. And trust me, it sounds worse than it actually is. This plastic does flex a lot. But we're going to grab our carb spray, clean this off. You also have this tiny little hole. More often than not, that's where these will clog up. You want to make sure these holes here are clear. Just like that. Same with this. So here's a little bit of a trick with these. You can get something called a welding tip cleaner. You can find these at Harbor Freight, but they are perfect for reaming out these holes. And you're just going to do that. And that's it. That's all you have to do. From the factory, these carburetors are made to run as lean as possible for emissions. I understand why they did it the way that they did, but for the end user, consumer, it's a real pain when they start acting up. But I just like to put in the next size tip cleaner as well, just to kind of open that up just a little bit more. You won't be able to see it with your naked eye, but somebody talks about jetting a carburetor or opening the jets, that's what they mean. So we're just gonna put this all back together. Just remember to take your time. Don't try and force anything that shouldn't be forced. Now here's the other thing. Inside, you see that little white donut looking ring right there. That's got a hole in it that goes up in through here. You want to make sure that that center hole is lined up and you can see the inside of the throat. It's kind of hard to see on camera. I have another video explaining more of this in depth. If you care to see it, it's in the description. Definitely take a look. But as far as this goes, it only goes back in one way. This part with the O-ring, there's a little cup down here on this side. It goes right in just like that. And you make sure that it goes all the way in. It can be kind of tricky to get back in, but you can see now there's the upper lip, or the tip rather, of the jet assembly right there in the middle of the throat. And that's what I was talking about. That little white donut has to be perfectly aligned, or else this is not going to go back in all the way. If this doesn't go back in all the way and you put everything back together, your carburetor is going to leak fuel. There's no way around that. That's just what's going to happen. So let's go back to the workbench and put everything back together. All right, so off camera, I did clean all these parts up. We'll start with putting float back on. You're just going to take your needle, throw it back in just like that. And for these, have it facing down like that. Then with the needle in, you're just going to line it up. There you go. Grab your pen. Needle nose. Just like that. Pretty simple. So this bowl can only go back on one way. This part right here, which picks up the fuel from the bottom of the carburetor, needs to be lined up perfectly with that little deal right in there. It can only go on one way, but it's going to go on just like that. And then rock the bowl back on. And you want to make sure that everything is sitting nice and flush. You don't want this bowl to be kind of lopsided or anything, because again, you will leak gas. Now here is the aforementioned O-ring. You're going to put that back on just like this. And then this pressure washer. Make sure the O-ring is down all the way. You just pop that back on and in, and there you go. So now just to put both of these bolts back in. Now going on with these, you do it, start them with your fingers first, then you just use a ratchet to tighten them down all the way. Not too tight. These are plastic threads that these steel metal bolts are going into. You can strip these out. I've seen people do it before. I've probably done it. It's very easy to do. Save yourself the hassle and put them back in with a ratchet. Let's go back to the lawnmower. Okay, so we're going to stick the big one on first, just like that. And the little one, which goes to the automatic choke. Carefully slide that back on. Might need to rock it a bit. But there you go. We're just going to carefully push it up against the side of the block. Just like that. Put the fuel line back on. Make sure you have the PCV line here. That just goes back in. Just like that. Now these again are plastic threads. So I'll just do these by hand. So let's put some gas in it and see if we can get it to start.